Welcome back to the Mindful Psychonaut episode 4. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about life and death. It's a bit of a touchy subject for some. Some people will happily talk about those topics, and actually probably most will avoid it, just given the nature of the subject. Most people, or at least all people, will experience people being born, but also people passing away, and we all have to deal with that. And it's how do we deal with that nature of the world, that dualistic nature of reality. And I think the main way of dealing with it is trying to really find a meaning to life, to be able to cope with those complexities and burdens that may bring that death may bring about. And I think almost trying to find a meaning to life may never be objectively answered, but I think life is what you make it. It's very much a individualistic, whatever life is to you, that is your experience, that is all that life will be for you. And you've got a lot of room to play around, given that it is your own thing to pick and choose. I think if life is a game and you want to play the game, then go ahead. Or if life is this horrible thing that has life and death in it, and there's a lot of ways that you can interpret the world and yourself within it. But I think most people will find meaning through responsibility. And having responsibilities that they have in the world. As people grow older, they tend to acquire more responsibility, such as being a parent or working a full-time job. It can provide meaning to life when happiness is absent. Some people strive for happiness in life, but happiness isn't necessarily guaranteed. And it's not all the time. You're not going to be happy all the time, even if that was something that you were striving for. So how do you cope with the harshness of reality in those times where happiness is absent? And most people will rely upon those responsibilities, whether it is, okay, I'm having a shit day, but I still need to I need to carry on. I need to continue working because I've got a family to feed. Other people in my job need my work. I am responsible for something being done, and actually those responsibilities, be it small or big, are going to help you push through those times without happiness. Definitely keeps you almost accountable. You need to keep going, even if times are tough. And I think that's people who work in hospitals, for example. That's probably the forefront of this life and death topic, just given the nature of their job. I don't think it necessarily gives much happiness. I'm sure it does in some sense, but I think it probably gives a very big sense of responsibility, and with that, meaning to life. Your responsibility and your purpose in life is to help others, and I think you really can just live a life of helping others in that kind of sense of a job being at the hospital, but in many other senses as well. And I think a lot of people or at least this sense of death is a touchy subject. I think it's the fear of death that we all have. It's coming to terms with our own, with what we are. We are these physical beings that have limitations, and eventually we will die. It's a lot longer on average than previously in the past, but we are going to die eventually. And how do we cope with that? And a lot of people are quite scared of death, whether it's they've been diagnosed with cancer or many other life-threatening diseases, or even freak accidents, and people just drop dead randomly. There's no real upcoming reason for that to have happened, or an accident happens and someone dies in a car crash. It is tragic, but it is just reality at the end of the day. Lots of people die, lots of people are born. Interestingly, so studies using psilocybin in cancer patients have, with a high dose, have significantly reduced levels of depression before death, and that is so they found reductions to depression and anxiety, which remained low after 6 months after that experience. And there's also evidence for those reductions sustaining across a 5-year period, which is it's very impressive, and I think it tells, or at least it shows a lot about the psychedelic experience, and how profound it is that it can actually teach you to be less fearful, teach you to be more open to experience, and actually you can approach death as that kind of experience. We don't really know what happens after death. I think until you die, that'll be when you know. But yeah, we can only speculate about what happens. So I think some people will say there's nothing, or that there's so many different things that there could be, because obviously we don't know. It is, some people may be set in their way, a certain way of thinking, just because it helps them deal with life and death. If they're constantly speculating about what could be, it's a lot to think about. If you can just set yourself down on there's nothing after life, or I'm going to go to heaven or hell after life. There's a lot of, or I'm going to get reincarnated. There's so many different possibilities. And I think we tend to just kind of sign up to one, or many, and either have that fixed view, or are actually quite open to, I don't really know what's going to happen. So these psychedelic experiences in those cancer patients definitely have a way of almost shaking up the certainties that we have, maybe surrounding life and death, which is why those kind of depression and anxiety were lowered after this psychedelic trip. And it's definitely a very humbling experience, as it opens you up to the potential for different kinds of experience, and the complex nature of consciousness. And I think when you do know that you're going to die, you don't know specifically when, but you know it's going to be happening soon, at the end, when you're approaching the end of your life. It's, or even when it is distant, or potentially distant, thinking about it now, when I'm most likely hopefully not going to die anytime soon, it's still something to think about, and it is still something very profound to understand and to consider that my parents will die, probably before I die, and that's going to be very tough. And my friends will die, or I'll die and I'll never see anyone again. And my brothers might die, or will die eventually, and it's not a very nice thing to think about when you think about like your loved ones and actually losing something like that, or you passing away and never being able to almost see them again. But it's something that we have to come to terms with. And I think bringing it back to something I said last podcast episode is almost those things that you fear. If you can approach those things that you fear, actually the obstacle of that fearful object reduces, and you kind of grow stronger out of it. So being able to approach and ask these questions and have discussions about life and death, I think can definitely help you deal with those things more often. Because it is, as I said, like, it is the unfortunate reality of this life that we live. And yeah, so this psychedelic experience being very humbling, opening you up to an experience bracket. If you thought that there was only this high and this low in the world, actually now you have a much wider range of potential experience. What is the potential for the human experience? And actually having a psychedelic experience really shakes that up a bit and makes you reassess and just think, wow, if this has been here all this time, this potential experience that I could have, what else is there? I think we're very close-minded and limited in what we think is possible, until we are shown otherwise. So it's until you are shown otherwise, it is quite hard to almost believe that something like that might occur. But yeah, when you do have that experience, when you are shown, wow, this is something else, you're definitely gonna maybe start questioning things that may have been certainties. Similar to the ski slope analogy, in which regular patterns of thinking are likely to have developed while young, and have been used time and time again. But as you go older, but this normal pattern of thinking no longer has to be the normative pattern of thinking. Given that that those brackets of experience have been expanded and things have been shaken up a bit, thoughts and actions can occur outside of that normal pattern process. And I think with mindfulness practice as well, it only serves to aid in this process. With mindfulness, you can start to be not only, I think in a psychedelic state you are very mindful anyway, just because the experience is so different, things are so changed, and you are aware of those changes, and that is very much at the front of your mind. But with mindfulness, you can almost start to bring back that mindfulness during the psychedelic experience, but you can start applying it during your day-to-day life. And you can be mindful of how you are in the present moment, and how you fall into these normal patterns of behavior. How does that happen? Do you notice it? What happens when you notice it? Do you shrug it off and continue down that normal pattern of behavior, which may not be the best? Do you do something new? I think being mindful and having the ability to actually realize what your normal way of functioning is. Maybe when you approach someone, you're on a walk and you see someone else, your normal approach might be, okay, look down, pretend I'm on my phone, or just try to avoid making eye contact because you get nervous. That could be something that you do, and it's something that some people do. And I think if you're mindful of that's the thing that you automatically want to do, you've then got the ability to go, well, I could continue doing this, and it might not be that bad. There's not really any significant impact from that, potentially. But on the other hand, you could look up. You could try and make eye contact with someone else. You could try and almost start smiling. I think if you make eye contact with someone else and you are not smiling or not even saying hi, it is going to be a bit awkward. It is not really going to be the best interaction. But you have that ability to be aware of what your normal functioning is, and step outside of that and do something new. Be aware of the opportunity for change. So yeah, the mindfulness practice will definitely coincide with the psychedelic experience. And I think more practice at mindfulness, more practice at being aware of what your current experience is, that applied within a psychedelic experience, but also within just the integration of that experience and the aftermath, can really help you change for the better if needs be. And in terms of life and death, it can make you more mindful of this framework that you have put, or that you've given yourself for, this is what happens when you die. You can very much start rethinking things if you realize that's what you've almost taught yourself as you were younger. And I definitely, it's much easier to come to terms with when you're younger and someone passes away. Okay, they go to heaven. Your granddad passed away and it's okay, he's gone to heaven, he's in a better place now. And actually, as a child, you go, I'm not sure if that's true, but I'd like that to be true. That seems like a nice thing. And you hold on to it, you hold it dear. And that could be the case, that could be what happens. And if it does, then that's amazing. But also, actually, it could be nothing. You could die and everything will just be gone. There's no experience. There's no way to determine what happens. But the mindfulness allows you to be mindful of how you feel about death, and actually allows you to approach it with a slightly more open mind, and to be more aware of the feelings and thoughts that might arise when you think about things like that. And it definitely comes together with the psychedelic experience. You have a greater consideration for how complex the internal self is, and it very much makes people rethink previous truths that they may hold, that they may have held. And I think makes people more curious if you are opened up to something of that nature of experience. Very profound, that top 5 most profound experiences of their lives. it very much will make you more curious to maybe other experiences. If this is what I can experience with this, what are the limits? There's so many. If you've never done them and you've never experienced certain things, what is the limit? This psychedelics is something that not many people may have done, but to have done it and experience something like that, it opens you up to what are the potentials for experience, and definitely makes you less. I think you can definitely take things, play around with ideas more. I think previously I may have thrown away ideas that seem silly or unrealistic, but actually now, what do I know? I've only experienced what I've experienced, and to say that something else isn't real just because I haven't experienced it is quite naive. So definitely makes you more curious and open to new experiences, and less afraid. It makes you approach those scary things. It makes you consider, okay, if you're having that psychedelic experience and you have to consider that you're dying soon, that's quite profound. And I think during the experience, you'll very much come to terms with the reality of your body and the limitations that it has, and actually that you will pass, and you're not sure what's going to happen. But it's something that the psychedelic experience, as well as mindfulness, can really help provide maybe greater empathy or thought for others who may also be experiencing grief. I think it's such a complex process, and with those kinds of experiences, you realize how limited your view of consciousness was, even in a mindful state. If you are truly being mindful, it is simply just this cloud of experience. It is simply things arising. You don't make the thoughts that you have. They just happen. They just appear. You don't generate the colors that you see. They are just appearing. Now, yeah, maybe on a physiological sense, these things are happening unconsciously, but they are simply just appearing for you. And when you realize that, and when you are experiencing just these experiences in a way that you may not have experienced it before, you might be distracted by the illusion of self. You might have been distracted by, I am this person, and I am I am around other people, whereas actually it's just all these things that you are experiencing, and you are almost interpreting them on top of the experience, the feeling and the perception of being a person, I am Joel, I am this person. That is also an experience that is arising. So it's very complex and it's very difficult to deal with sometimes. You just to strip it all back and realize where you are in the world and what you are. It is very humbling. And it is about learning to accept your own mortality. We do have physical limitations, and it's how do we deal with those limitations to go about our lives, whatever we make of it, but just being being able to know that actually, if you make this mistake, you may pass away and that's your life over. It's quite profound, and we just go in day out thinking things are fine, drive your car, you don't really think about death, but you could get in a car crash and there you go, game over. So it's definitely very far closer than I think we all like to think, or at least the potential for death. But yeah, I think being mindful really can help you understand your current experience of what you are now, where you are, and can really almost help you process the thoughts that might arise about life and death. And it goes on to talk about life after death, what happens. I don't think we know. I don't think we'll ever know, but it's fun to speculate. And yeah, I think first of all you need to consider the nature of experience. From the day that you were born, you wake up and you go to sleep, day in, day out, until you die, which is kind of a strange revelation when you realize, okay, I'm 21 years old and I have 20 years behind me, but I can track that back every single day behind, every day that has happened prior to this until the day I was born. There wasn't ever a time where I had a break or anything. It was just my life has been living each day, day in, day out until now. That's a lot of days, and hopefully I'll get to live until I'm much older, maybe 3-4 times as long as I have currently lived. And for that to be day in, day out, it's a very profound thing to think about. I like to think of being born as is like waking up after being born is like waking up after never having gone to sleep, and dying is like going to sleep and never waking up. Or at least it's a simple way to think about it. Whether that is what it's like, I'm not too sure. But some people may believe in an afterlife, and some people may believe that there's nothing. But I think that's all that we're able to do. It is just speculation. We can't ever truly know what happens. I like an idea from a YouTube video called The Egg. Essentially, when you die, you are reincarnated. But this reincarnation can be anything, at any time, in any place. Now, I think in the video they specify it to humans on the planet, but I think to have an experience, and as soon as your kind of life experience here has passed away, you could then be a frog 400 years ago or something like that. It's a strange thing to think about, but who's to say it's not true? You know, who's to prove me otherwise? And actually, in terms of the psychedelic experience and this feeling of oneness with the rest of the world, it very much relates to that, in the sense that if you are reincarnated as these different things, different people, or at least you as an experiencer are being reincarnated into everything for this infinite cycle, life and death, life and death, life and death, and you are just being different people across different times, future, past, present, actually then you realize, actually, if that was the case, you are simply interacting with yourself, just a different life that you lived, and almost makes you can very much play around with the idea that we are this collective consciousness, and actually we are all linked together. Maybe you don't remember, maybe that's the nature of it. You don't remember your previous lives when you are born into the new one, but that's what you do, and it definitely makes you have a kind of a greater consideration for others. I think it emphasizes that sense of unity with others and the world, taking kind of quite, I guess I think about kind of the traditional Christian values, just loving your neighbor as yourself, loving other people as you would love yourself. I think in the video there was someone almost holding, giving some money to the homeless, or holding an umbrella over someone in the rain. Like, it's those acts of kindness that you do for other people, which actually, if you think about it in this united sense, you could just be making another life of yours better. And it's, I guess in some way, that if you were to think about that only, it would be quite selfish, but it's a nice feeling or idea to play around with, because it is very unified, and definitely makes you feel very connected with other people and the actions that you take. And yeah, there is a consideration for almost universal consciousness. What is consciousness? When you have those experiences which expand your not expand your consciousness, but the experience of being conscious is far different to what you've ever experienced before. How do we know that just the experience of being conscious is different when you're not in this physically alive state? When you die before you're born, are you conscious? Are you conscious of certain things? Is conscious just like, is there an experience of being dead? Is there a general feeling that you experience, or does everything? Do you get reincarnated? Do you experience what it's like to be? I don't know. Yeah, to be like kind of buried in the ground as this thing, which there's, yeah, I don't know. It's a big question. Where does consciousness come from? Is it the structure of the brain, or is actually because this, obviously the structure of the brain and everything that makes us who we are is almost gives rise to the consciousness that we have. But what's to say that there isn't another version of consciousness, or an constantly altering consciousness based on the condition that you're currently in? If you are eating psychedelic mushrooms, that's something that you are putting into your body, which is changing the physical state of your body, and everything that's made up of you. And your experience of consciousness is very different. Same as when you pass, like if you die, your physical state is changing drastically. And actually, with that, it almost has the appearance of people dying and therefore not having any more consciousness. And it's just I guess it's an idea to play around with, like, can you be conscious outside of being a human, I guess, or a living being? Like, are trees conscious? Like, what are they conscious of? Because they're living, they're growing in the ground. But it's a very odd and strange idea to think about, but it is a fun one. But overall, I do think a lot of the certainties that we may have about life and death are put into place to deal with the chaotic nature of one day losing the ones you love, or one day your loved ones losing you. And I think that both mindfulness and psychedelics, understanding your personal psychology and how the way that you function, can definitely play key roles in reevaluating your beliefs about life and death, but also in helping you to manage the burden that may come about when someone dies. I definitely found that this year, well, not this year, last year, when my nan passed away. It was very much, people have died in my life before. I think every time someone dies, it is different. It's different each time. It's a different person, so it will be different each time. But also, you are a different person. It's not that everyone is dying on the same day and you're grieving for each of them individually. Actually, your 8-year-old self, when someone dies, is very different to your 16-year-old self and your 20-year-old self. There's a big difference. And being mindful of how you feel in that present moment, and how others may feel, someone who has had this relationship with another person, whether it be me to my nan, and actually I've known her for 21 years, or whether it be my dad to my nan, and actually that's his mum, and that's a 50-year relationship. Like, that's more than double the length that I've had, and it's a very different relationship. And it's to be mindful of how you feel, your present situation, and then to start thinking about others and what situation they may be in, what is their current experience like in comparison to yours. Obviously, you'll never truly know, but you can get some idea, or you can at least consider it. It definitely helps you deal with death in a far greater way than far easier way, I think. Maybe not easier, but necessary. I think it might be quite difficult to think about those things. It's definitely not the nicest thing to think about, but it can definitely allow you to process things a little bit easier, I'd say. And being able to think about those things, maybe you might be able to help those ones who are burdened, be able to comfort them, and just being able to deal with the experience and move on from that in a good position. What can you learn from that experience of life and death? And that's about it for today. Bit of a strange episode, I guess. Life and death is a weird topic to talk about, but I think that's just a cultural thing. I know a lot of cultures it's heavily integrated, and I guess it is integrated. We have funerals. It's not just something that death isn't a meaningless event, but it's how do you deal with the meaning of death that can vary from culture to culture, and person to person. But apart from that, hopefully you enjoyed the episode. If you are enjoying these episodes and you think someone else might benefit from listening to them, then do feel free to share it across. Obviously, this is on Spotify and YouTube, so either of those will be pretty good. And apart from that, hopefully you will come back again and listen to more episodes of this podcast.